Okay, welcome back. So we've been talking about this problem where we have tweaked the setup to say that someone has an inheritance of 24 and they can consume that in any time. So here's what that means. So it means that, let's do the same thing. So let's say, okay, so if we have someone who gets education, I guess let's start off with no education. So in order to think about the utility for no education, well, what we want to think about is, remember, we're looking for the amount of consumption that the person has in each period, right? So we want 25 plus something and 25 plus something because this person is going to have the ability to supplement their wages with this inheritance. Okay, so what that means is we want to take this 25 and we're going to add in some amount of inheritance, and the amount that we want to add is half of it, right? So this is just like what we had been talking about earlier, where if you have a fixed amount of consumption to spread around 2 periods, you want to spread it equally. So that means we're going to consume half of the inheritance in the first period, half of the inheritance in the second period. So this would be root 37 plus root 37, which I calculated earlier, and is 12.2. Okay, so if the person does not get an education, they'll wind up with a utility of 12.2. The utility of someone who gets education, on the other hand, is going to be the utility of consuming 1 plus something and consuming 64 plus something. Well, here, this person is not going to be able to consume the same amount in each period, right? They just don't have enough resources for that. They don't have an inheritance that would be able to bring 1 all the way up to match 64. And so they're going to take this 24, this inheritance of 24, and what they're going to do is to put all of it towards that first period, right? Because the idea is, in the first period, the income is very low, and so adding more consumption in the first period adds a lot of utility, right? So we saw that when we calculated the marginal utility for both, right? So what that means is that if this person gets an education, then their utility is going to be, the consumption in the first period will be 1 plus 24, and then 64 plus 0. Right, so the person's allowed to consume some inheritance in the second period, but that's not the most sensible thing to do. Okay, so this is root 25 plus root 64 is 5 plus 8, which is 13. And so what we find is that person with this inheritance of 24, they choose education. And so what this is a story of people who start off without family wealth are more likely to remain relatively poor because the main idea here is just that they don't have enough resources to be able to get by in the first period while they are getting an education. So the sort of takeaway here is that the person, so this is sort of a story of, if you want to sort of boil it down quickly, you could think about this as, rich families stay rich. So that's the sort of takeaway here. That's the sort of message that this problem is trying to get at. So one thing that we have glossed over completely. So, one additional factor in the real world. So one additional factor in the real world is that it is possible to get loans in order to get an education. And so, I guess maybe an optimistic take on all of this is that this is sort of an explanation why, the banking system in general and student loans in particular, why those are good things. Now, in reality, student loans have some issues of their own. It's always challenging to be part of a student loan system when sometimes the information can be a little murky and possibly predatory. But we'll sort of leave a detailed discussion about banking and about loans for another part of the course. Okay, so that's it for the lesson today. The main things that we focused on were about how people have preferences over time and about how those preferences over time can create a dynamic of persistent inequality from one generation to the next. Thanks, everyone.